What happens when a royal sits down for one of the most prestigious interviews in America, only to walk out in fury? Prince Harry's highly anticipated 60 Minutes interview with Anderson Cooper began with warmth and composure. But as questions deepened, the tension cracked wide open. This wasn't just an interview. It was a slow-burning collision between a seasoned journalist and a defiant royal, spiraling into one of the most unforgettable walkouts in television history. The room was calm, understated, and intimate, just like every 60 Minutes setup. No grand stage, no studio audience, just two chairs, a coffee table, and the unmistakable quiet of serious journalism. Anderson Cooper greeted Prince Harry warmly, extending his hand with a respectful smile. "Harry, thank you for being here," Anderson began, his tone carrying both gravity and hospitality. Harry nodded curtly, his posture relaxed but with a certain stiffness that hinted at the storm underneath. "Well, I suppose the world expects me to explain myself, so here I am." Anderson chuckled lightly, steering the moment back to ease. "That's the beauty of conversations like this. People get to hear directly from you." The first few minutes unfolded smoothly. Anderson asked about Harry's life in America, his projects, the transition from royal duties to private ventures, and the challenges of raising a family outside the crown's shadow. Harry's answers, though, already carried a sharper edge than expected. "America has been tolerable," he said, his voice tinged with arrogance. "At least here I don't have to bow to outdated rituals or pretend my family understands me. It's liberating to finally live in a place where people treat me as special, not just a spare part of a system." Anderson adjusted in his chair, unfazed. He had interviewed presidents, generals, and celebrities under fire. Ego and pride were no strangers to him. He leaned forward slightly. "But isn't there also comfort in tradition? A sense of stability, perhaps?" Harry smirked. "Comfort for whom?" "For the ones sitting on golden thrones. Tradition is just a cage with better wallpaper. My family clings to it because it hides the cracks." The tension in the room shifted ever so slightly. Anderson noticed the sudden flash of defiance in Harry's eyes, but his own tone stayed calm, steady. "That's an interesting way of putting it. And yet, millions still admire the monarchy, seeing it as a symbol of unity and resilience. What do you say to them?" Harry's reply came swift, dismissive. "I say they're infatuated with a fairy tale. They don't see the machinery behind it, the manipulation, the silencing, the control. They celebrate the crown, but they don't care who bleeds for it." Anderson gave a small pause, his journalist instincts sharp. He recognized the early signs of escalation, but part of his role was to let the truth unravel, even if it grew uncomfortable. He shifted gently to a different angle. "Let's talk about family," he said softly. "You've spoken about Meghan and your children with deep emotion before. How is life as a husband and father away from the institution?" Harry's jaw tightened, though he smiled faintly. "Life as a husband and father is exactly as it should be, mine. And frankly, the press has no right to dissect it, nor does the monarchy. I protect what's mine. That's more than they ever did for me." Anderson nodded but didn't let the arrogance slide. "But when you speak publicly, whether in interviews, documentaries, or your book, you open the door for questions. Do you feel there's a contradiction between demanding privacy while also sharing intimate details on your own terms?" Harry's eyes flickered with irritation. "That's a tired argument. Privacy doesn't mean silence. It means control. I decide what the world deserves to know, not the other way around. If people can't grasp that, then they're not worth addressing." The shift was undeniable now. What started as an engaging interview was tilting toward confrontation. Anderson, however, remained composed, even offering a half smile. "That's certainly one way of putting it. Some might say that sounds selective." Harry leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Selective? No, it's called freedom. Something you, as an American, should understand better than most. The words hung in the air like a challenge. The warmth of the opening had evaporated, replaced by an icy tension that made even the quietest creaks of the set sound loud. Anderson gave a slow nod, jotting down a note on his pad, though his expression remained neutral. Inside, though, he knew, this was no ordinary interview. This was a powder keg, and Harry was holding the match. The stillness in the room was deceptive. Cameras rolled quietly, crew members barely dared to breathe, and in the center sat two men, one seasoned in the art of journalism, the other simmering with defiance. The tension was now visible, like heat rising from asphalt. Anderson Cooper leaned forward slightly, his tone still measured, calm, but his questions sharpened just enough to pierce through Harry's polished armor. You've spoken about your struggles with the institution, Anderson began, but I want to ask about something deeper. Your mother, Princess Diana, became a global symbol not only because of her role, but because of the way she connected with people. Do you feel that you carry her legacy? For a moment, Harry's lips pressed together in a thin line. The question touched a raw nerve, and his response came fast, clipped. Legacy is a word the media loves. You put my mother on pedestals, you tore her down, and then you expect me to carry that weight as though it's a crown I should be grateful for. I am not my mother's replacement, and I won't let anyone use her name to measure me. Anderson nodded slowly, keeping his composure. Fair point. But many see you as continuing her spirit of independence, of challenging tradition. Isn't that something you embrace? Harry scoffed, leaning back in his chair with folded arms. You all want to turn me into a symbol because it makes for better headlines. I'm not here to be a candle in the wind for anyone's nostalgia. My mother's memory belongs to me, to my family, not to the public, and not to journalists trying to spin a story. The words were sharp, almost accusatory. Anderson absorbed them without flinching, his decades of experience carrying him through. All right, Anderson said softly, then let's pivot. Meghan, the two of you have spoken at length about the difficulties you've faced. Some critics argue that your marriage pulled you further from your family. How do you respond to that? Harry's eyes flashed with irritation. Critics? You mean the same people who have never met her, who write columns from behind desks, pretending they understand what marriage means? Meghan saved me from a suffocating institution. She didn't pull me away. She freed me. Anyone who can't see that is blind. Anderson kept his voice even, though Harry's hostility was now undeniable. But when you describe her as saving you, doesn't that imply that without her, you'd still be trapped? Doesn't that give her an almost singular power over your decisions? Harry smirked, shaking his head. Singular power. Number, it's called partnership. Something most journalists like you can't comprehend because you're too busy dissecting other people's relationships instead of living your own. The sting was direct, but Anderson maintained his professional mask, refusing to bite back. Instead, he scribbled another note and pivoted again. You've also been open about raising your children in America. How is fatherhood different here than it might have been back in the UK? Harry exhaled sharply, as though the question itself bored him. It's simple. Here, my children get to be normal. They're not props for photographers. They're not pawns in some royal chess game. And unlike back home, they have a father who protects them. Anderson tilted his head. So you don't believe your family would have protected them? Harry's tone was almost mocking. Protected them? The monarchy doesn't even protect its own heirs, let alone the so-called spare's children. My children would have been sacrifices on the altar of tradition. That's not family, that's exploitation. Anderson gave a small sigh, his patience tested but still intact. Some might argue that by stepping into documentaries, books, and interviews like this one, You're also putting them in the spotlight, just under your own terms. How do you reconcile that? Harry leaned forward now, his voice growing harder. I don't need to reconcile anything. I decide what's best for my family. The media doesn't. The Crown doesn't. And certainly not people like you. The room chilled instantly. Anderson's jaw flexed, but his tone stayed calm. It seems every question about accountability, Harry, you redirect back to control. Do you think there's room for balance? Harry's smirk widened, almost smug. Balance is a myth. You either control your story or it controls you. I refuse to be a victim of narrative anymore. That's something you'll never understand because your entire career depends on poking at other people's lives. For the first time, Anderson's brow furrowed, the faintest sign of irritation flickering across his otherwise steady demeanor. He let the silence stretch, watching Harry revel in it. Finally, he spoke, his tone deliberate. Let's look ahead then. What do you see for yourself in the future? What does life look like for Prince Harry 10 years from now? Harry chuckled under his breath, but it wasn't warm, it was condescending. The future? The future is mine, not something I need to lay out like a press release for public consumption. I'll do what I want, when I want, and people can either accept that or choke on their expectations. Anderson tapped his pen against his note, once, twice, slowly. The calm mask was still there, but the weight behind his eyes betrayed the storm building. He shifted slightly in his chair, exhaled, and leaned back. Interesting, Martin, he said quietly, almost to himself. Then he looked back at Harry. You know, Harry, I've interviewed people at their highest and lowest points. Presidents under scandal, soldiers returning from war, families broken by tragedy. They all shared one thing: humility. Do you think there's a risk that yours has been lost along the way? Harry stiffened, the smugness momentarily slipping into a scowl. Humility? Don't lecture me about humility. I've lived through things you couldn't survive. If I come across as unapologetic, it's because I've earned the right to be. Humility is for those still begging for approval. I don't need anyone's. The words echoed heavier than anything before. The air in the room thickened, the kind of silence that felt suffocating. Anderson gave a slow nod, his voice still calm but edged now with steel. That's one way of seeing it. The cameras kept rolling, but everyone in the room felt the same thing. This interview was teetering on the edge of collapse, and the fall was coming fast. The quiet of the set had turned heavy, almost